So I've started the recording, and now I am sharing my desktop. So everyone should be able to see my desktop now, and you should see my Chrome browser. Does everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. So this week, it's kind of a busy week. It's one of our busiest weeks in that we'll do with Codio. And so we're going to cover what we can cover in the conference call. But the other thing I wanted to make sure everybody knew about was the YouTube videos. Why is that up? Hold on, let me get rid of this minimize thing here. There we go. So the YouTube videos for my channel should go through all of, so if anybody hasn't been on the channel, please go to the channel, because this is where we will have intro to multi-list, intro to list, access data, change data in a list. So a lot of the things that we won't be able to go through in class today should be up on the Codio, on my, it's been a long day, I apologize. They should be up on my YouTube channel. And I don't think I have Project 2 videos up here yet, but if not, Project 1, Intro to Codio. It does not look like I have the Project 2 videos up here. I will try and get them up here this week. And I'll probably put a few more videos up on multi-data and dictionaries. So if we don't get through it tonight, by hopefully Friday, I'll have additional videos up. So subscribe to the channel or come back to the channel, because this is where I will put all the videos up. So that being said, we have a lot to do tonight. We're going to start with lists. So basically, what is a list? Okay, well, I have a grocery list, or I have a to-do list. That's what a list is. And a list is just anything that you want to, a sequential series of information. And I'm sorry about that minimized word. I don't know why it's not going away. So a list in Python is just like you have a grocery list. You have a to-do list. They're just sequential series of pieces of information. Now, up until this point, all of the pieces of information we've had in Python have been stored in individual variables. And those individual variables are great. They're wonderful. They're a building block of Python. However, the problem is that you need a single variable for each piece of information. Well, if you don't know how many pieces of information you're going to have, let's say how many users are going to log into or going to check your YouTube channel on any given day, if I don't know, if I want to keep a list of those users and I don't know how many they're going to be, well, how do I know what to do? Because I will only have, I could define 10 variables for, one for each user, and hope that no more than 10 view my YouTube channel in that day. But what happens if 11 people do? Well, I've lost that 11th piece of data. And I don't want to do that. I want to be able to have my program basically use what data it's given. And the way to do that is to use data structures. And a list is just a form of a data structure. Okay? That's all it is. It's a way of organizing your data in memory. Lists have a very specific syntax, and they have a very specific format. It's new to us this week, so it might take a little bit of getting used to. What you see up on the screen right now is the Codio section 2 lists explained. And so all of this is basically just talking about what a list is. A list is just that. It's a list. It's a sequential set of something. Now, it can be a list of strings. It can be a list of numbers. It can be an empty list. And as we see on line 21 in the left-hand side of my screen, it can be all kinds of different things. And that's the one thing that's very nice about Python, and it's also extremely unique in Python. There are other languages that have it, but a lot of languages don't. The nice thing about Python is, as we see down here on 21, you can actually have different types within the same list. So a list doesn't have to be all strings, and it doesn't have to be all integers. It can be strings and integers. So that makes it very, very handy. So there's a couple of different things we have to do. First, we have to figure out how to create a list. And then we have to figure out how to change elements in a list. So the way you create a list is there's a couple of different ways. If we look at example 2, line 3, we see a variable called a list. And a list is set equal to a list of strings. Now, how do I know it's a list? One of the first ways I know it's a list is directly to the right-hand side of the equal sign, there is an open square bracket. An open square bracket, there's only one thing you can do with an open square bracket in Python, and that's begin a list. And just like you have to have an open square bracket at the beginning, at the end, you have to have the closing square bracket. So just like parentheses, the square brackets have to match. And inside those square brackets are the elements inside the list. So on line 3, I have 4 elements. I have Alice, Shanila, Bob, and Tariq. So my list assigned to the variable list has 4 elements in it. And if I print a list, it's going to print out all those elements. So let's run the code here just so we can see. So we have this first line on the run the code is the elements as they currently are in a list. Now this is great, except how do I get to an individual element in the list? Well, that's by the index of the value in a list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this code here a little bit to show you a little bit better. I'm going to say a list of 0. I'm just going to print these. Actually, I'm going to do it better for you because we're going to have to do this in a little bit. I'm going to print and say for name in a list, and we'll see a little bit better how to use this later, but I want to introduce it now. Print name. So I'm going to run the code, and you'll see I've got all the names out. Now I'm going to change this a little bit more, and I'm going to say for counter in len of a list, print a list, and I'll show you the syntax in a little bit. This actually, we should have reviewed that, and I realized we didn't, the print syntax for the last one, but I didn't take points off for that project. This is going to be counter. Okay. So sorry about that. That parenthesis was just wrong. So, wrong language. Sorry, I've been programming in another language today. Okay, so now if I run the code, I gave myself an error. The object is not iterable. For counter and when a list. Oh, my bad. I apologize for being confusing. I programmed in another language today. So my syntax is not good right now. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was accessors. Okay, how do I access what's going on in the list? I access it via an element. All lists always begin at 0. So the first element in the list is always 0. The element is always 0. So if I say print a list of 0, I'm going to get the first element in the list, which is Alice. If I say print a list of 1, then the second, because this is 0, Alice is 0, Shanila is 1, then I'm going to get Shanila. Similarly, if I say print a list of 2, then I'm going to get Bob. So basically what you have to remember when you're dealing with lists is that the index, which is what 0, 1, and 2 are, in lines 12, 13, and 14, those are the indexes. Indexes for a list always start at 0. You use an index to get to the value in the list. So the index of 0 gets you to the value of Alice. The index of 1 gets you to the value of Shanila. The index of 2 gets you to the value of Bob. And there are 4 elements in the list, which means you will have indexes of 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now we can change an element in the list simply by using it. We can change the value of an element in the list simply by using the index, the variable. So I have variable a list. I'm going to say I want to change the element at index 1. The element at index 1 is Shanila, and we're going to change that to Sean. And so down here, we see that we have changed Shanila to Sean. Okay, so there are other ways to create lists and to add information to the lists. Now, what we're seeing here on 2.2 is closer to what you're going to do in real life. I'm going to create an empty list because I don't know how many things are going to be in that list. I don't always know that I'm only going to have 4 things on my grocery list. Or I don't know that I'm only going to have 5 things on my to-do list. I might have that to-do list may grow to 10 or 15. Who knows? So what I want to do is I want to make the list as flexible as possible. So in 2.2, we're learning some more flexible ways of creating and adding information to the list. So on line 3, what we're doing is we're creating an empty list. A variable on the left-hand side of the equal sign is a variable. And in this case, my variable's name is numList. And on the right-hand side of the equal sign is an open and close square bracket. That means I have created a list with nothing in it. There are no elements. It's got exactly nothing in it. It is empty. And that's great and wonderful, but then how do I put something into the list? Well, I do it by using the append command, or the append function. All lists have a series of functions. And in fact, let me show you this right now. Let's just go out, and Python.org has a lot of great stuff. And in this case, I'm at Python.org 3 tutorial data structures. List is a data structure, and what we will see here is we will see append. What this tells me is it tells me all of the different functions I can use because I've defined a list. And I know I've defined a list because I have the open and close square brackets. So there's a function called append. If I want to know more about it, I can go out to python.org and say, what does append really do? Well, append adds an item to the end of a list. And so that's what I'm doing. So on line 6, I'm adding the number 1 to the end of my list called numList. And since there's nothing in numList, 1 is going to be the first element in the list. So let's do this. Let's add some print statements here because I think it'll make it clearer. We're going to print numList. And we're going to print it again. We're just going to print this a couple of times so you can see how the list grows and the changes in the information in the list. So here we'll see on line 6, we printed numList for the first time and it was empty. On line 8, we printed numList for the second time and it had 1 element in it. On line 10, we printed numList again and it had 2 elements in it. And on line 12, we printed it again, and it had 3 elements in it. So we just added 3 elements to the list. It was very simple, very easy. We use the append function. Now, what if I want to insert something to the list? Let's say I forgot to add something to the list, and I want to put it in a specific place. I can use the insert function that we got because we defined the list up here in line 3. And I can say at index 2, put the value 3. What you'll see when you print it out again on line 19 is you'll have 4 elements in the list. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Lists have lengths. So just like I said, the list has 4 elements. Well, a list will have a length to it. If a list has no elements in it, its length will be 0. And programmatically, how do we know how long it is? I may not know how long it is. I may not have been the one who created it. Somebody may be passing me in a list, which we'll talk about passing variables in functions later. But len is what gives us the length. So the function len will tell you how long a list is. So, and that's what it does. It's how many elements are in it. So if I look at, and by the way, you can use len on strings or on lists, and you can use them on lots of things. But if we look at line 7, we see that we have a list called a list with 5 values in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it has those 5 numbers in it. And if we want to print the length of it, we just say len, open parenthesis, our variable that contains the list, and in this case it's called a list, and a close parenthesis. So that's how you get the length of a list. Last week, we talked about for. We talked about for and ranges. One of the nice things that we have with lists, since it has a length, is we can use it in a for loop. In fact, I almost only ever use for loops when I'm going over any kind of a data structure, whether it's for loops, whether it's lists, dictionaries. We'll learn about using for loops or actually it's a while loop. No, it's a for loop for files. So for loops are what you're mostly going to use when you have to iterate over a list. So if I look at, and you can use the for variable in range, just like you could last week when you were dealing with a range from, let's say, 0 to 10. In this case, your range is going to be from 0 to the length of the list. And you're always going to want to make sure you go to the length of the list and not one more, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So here I can see that I have a variable named stop, and I can say that I have 5 elements in my list, and I can see that when I look at it. I have the integers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. I'm going to say a range. Now, this is just an extra step. You don't really need to do this, but they're doing it for this example. And I would say the way to iterate over my list is to use a for loop. So in this case, it's for I. I is just our helper variable here. In the range, in this case, it's a range. I'm going to print my list of I. Well, that's great and wonderful. And we'll see here that I print 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So now, what happens if I add 1 to the end of my list? If I add 1 to the length? If I do that, I get a syntax. I get an error. I get a runtime error that says list index out of range. That is because I'm telling it to go 1 past the end of the list. I've only got 5 elements in the list, but I've told it to look for the 6th element, and it's not there, so I'm going to get a syntax error. So if you're debugging your code and you get this error, it is very likely that you have done something like added 1 to the end of the list, or added 1 to the, you've taken the length of the list and added 1 to that. When you don't do that, you'll be able to iterate over the list just fine. So here on line 17, they're just showing you a shortcut for what they did in lines 4 through 10 above. And they're also here just showing you how to use range on line 25, which we used last week. Okay, there's actually an easier way to do this. And the easiest way is to use the for loop with an in statement. The in says my list. So instead of a range, we're just saying loop over the list. I don't care how many elements in it. I don't care what the length of the list is. Just loop over the list. I don't have to count. I don't have to get the length. I just want you to loop. And that's actually the simplest way to do it. And for when you're using data structures, this will be the way you use it mostly. Okay, so we're going to go through some of these challenges. And I'm going to try and be conscious of time because we still have 2D lists and dictionaries that I'd like to go over, at least some of them tonight, and then try and put some videos up on YouTube tomorrow night. Okay, so this is, we're passing in a list of numbers, add up all the elements, and output the list, or output the result. So what do we have here? Well, here we have import sys. We always have import sys in the beginning of all of our scripts. It's fine. On line 4, we have our input syntax is a little different this time. And our input syntax is basically different because it's saying string argv1, which says Codio is giving me some input argument. But then we have this dot split with a comma in it. Well, that says to split up everything by the comma. So dot split will say, turn it into a list for me if there's a comma, if the elements are comma separated. So if it were 1, 2, 3 in a string, so let me do this. I'm just going to do this as a real quick test to show you. So if I have my stir equals 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll see they're separated by commas, and that's great, but I really want them into a list. So what I'm going to do is say my list equals my stir dot split with a comma. And now I'm going to print my list. So now ignore the program output. What's important here is that I turned my list, 1, 2, 3, my string into a list. So that's what's happening right here in this line of code. So let's get rid of this. So let's look at the program statement. It says add up all the elements and output the result. So I'm pretty sure that the elements in the list are going to be integers because we're going to have to add them up. So first of all, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to need a helper variable, and I'm going to call that helper variable sum. Okay? And then I'm going to use the for statement that we just found out about in the last one, and I'm going in the last slide, and I'm going to say for, and I'm just going to say val in numbers sum equals sum plus val. Let's see what happens when I do that. I have an unsupported operand type for plus for int because it's a stir. Now we've seen this error message before. And this error message is happening because what's really in the list numbers are strings. Remember, everything that comes into Python from the outside is automatically considered a string unless we do something to make it not a string. So in this case, what I have to do is down here while I'm doing the summation, I'm going to use the int function like we have in the past weeks, and I'm going to turn the value into an integer. And lo and behold, everything works just fine. So remember that even though we're splitting up here, we're doing this new great split stuff, it still comes in as a string. So the elements in the list are still going to be a string. And you have to do something to each individual element in the list to turn it into something that you need. And in this case, I needed integers. So here we're going to populate a new list. And basically they're giving us n. They're going to say create a list, then using a loop, populate the list with n elements. Set each list element to the index multiplied by 10. So, and they're saying beware they might pass you in 0. So let's see what happens. So n is what they're giving me. You'll notice that I've got that it's telling us it's converting whatever it's sending us to an int. So first of all, what we want to do is we want to create a list. I'm going to call it my list, and it's an empty list. So it's just the open and close brackets. And now I want to, sorry, Carlos, hold on. Let me look at your, okay. On the previous challenge, were we meant to leave it as an X on the output? incorrect. I'm sorry, I'm not following. Let's go back and look. So, oh, I'm sorry, it is an X. The output was incorrect. Program failed for input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9. Thank you, Carlos. Because as Carlos caught me doing, I got ahead of myself and forgot to print some. Thank you, Carlos. So now we'll move on to the next one. Okay. So I've created my empty list called My List. And so now I want to populate that list. So N is going to be some integer, and I'm going to say for val in range 0, comma, N. So from 0 to N, I want to append val. So, and then I'm going to print, oops, val multiplied by 10, my bad. Okay, so then I'm going to print my list. Let's see what happens. Okay, so they gave us 8, and my output is 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, which is correct. So I have 8 elements in the list starting at 0. Now, if they had passed me in 0 like they threatened they might have, the list would still be empty, which is what it should be. Okay. This is a short string list, and I think what I'm going to do right now is we're here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop doing lists right now, and I'm going to go to 2D lists and then dictionaries, and then if we have time, come back to this, and if not, I'll post a couple videos that to augment what we need to do. So for right now, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to 2D lists. Oh, yeah, we were just running the code challenges. 2D lists. So what we just talked about was one-dimensional lists. And a one-dimensional list is just that. It's just a list of strings or integers or strings and integers. It's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that's great, but sometimes I want to keep lists of lists. And some people are like that. They like lists of lists. And it's very, very handy in a programming language to be able to keep a list of a list. Because oftentimes your lists will have relationships. We'll talk a little bit more about relationships when we get into dictionaries, because that's where we really, really learn how to define them. But in this case, we want a list called a two-dimensional array or a two-dimensional list. So here's just our experimental section, which we always have. And what we have a variable called people. On the right-hand side of that variable, we have an open square bracket. Immediately after that, we have another open square bracket, which tells me absolutely I have a list of a list. So I have inside my people list, I have 3 lists. And those lists have the name, age, the color, and the car. So Alice is 23 and she drives a blue Audi. Tariq is 18 and he drives a red Mini. Bob is 31 and he drives a green Renault. So that's basically what you're doing. And so I have a list of people, and that list of people contains a list of the person's name, their age, the color, and type of car that they drive. So to access a list of lists, what you do is you always have the outside and the inside. So what we're always doing is we're doing row, then column. If you think about this as a spreadsheet, you always have a row down the left-hand side and a column on the top. So in this case, it's the same thing. It's just a little bit different to visualize it that way. So we have a row. On line 3 is a row. That row contains 4 columns or 4 cells. The first cell contains Alice. The second cell contains the number 23. The third cell contains the word blue. And the fourth cell contains the word Audi. So before I run through a for loop, let's just look at this for a second. If I want to print Alice's age, how do I do that? Well, I start with the variable name, people, and then I said it's always row, then column. So this is the row, and the row we have to remember is at element 0, because as far as the people variable is concerned, element 0 is still just one thing. The one thing happens to be a list. So I'm going to print 0. Well, is that what I want? No, I have Alice, 23, blue, and Audi when I just say print people 0. But I want Alice's age. Well, if I look at the list that contains Alice, I see that Alice is at element 0. Her age is at element 1. So I'm going to put 1, and when I run the code, I get 23, which is exactly what I want. So here I have the variable people, I have row 0, and I have column 1. So row 0, not column 0, but column 1. Now, how do I do this without having to put a lot of these print statements in? Well, how I do that is I do a for loop, and I will do a loop within a loop. And you can do that in Python. You can have nested loops, and that's what this is called. It's called nested looping. So I have a for. The for statement, again, for is your friend when it comes to lists. I'm always going to go row-wise and then column-wise. So the first for loop will always be the rows. So it'll go first to the row with Alice in it, then the row with Tariq in it, then the row with Bob in it. And then I do another for loop that's inside, because if we look at this indentation, this for loop is indented under this for loop. So it is part of the code block for the first for loop. And this we will go column-wise. So now I have gotten to the row, and I want to see what the individual columns have to tell me. So in this case, I'm going to say for column in row, because row is what got me here to the column. And then I'm going to print the column. So that's how you access data in a multidimensional list. And this is just going over some of the things I already explained, and here's the example. We have a classroom. The classroom has students and desks, and the teacher wants a seating plan. And in this case, she's going to use a 2D list for a seating plan. So she has 3 rows of desks, and in each row there are 4 desks. And she's putting up a seating chart to show where the students are going to sit. Now, how do you dynamically create a 2D list? Well, I'm not going to step through the chart right now. You guys can step through the flowed. But basically, you start with the same way you started with an empty list before. In this case, it's just an open and close square bracket. So in that list, we've already looked at that in the regular list. So how do I then add a multidimensional nature to this list? My variable is called data. Data is an empty list. Now here I found out that Codio is telling me I want 5 rows and 4 columns. So I know I'm going to use a nested for loop. So on line 11, I see my first outer for loop. And that outer for loop says for x is just a utility variable, in range 0 to rows. So I'm going to start at 0 because my elements always start at 0 for a list. And I'm going to go till rows. So I'm going to have rows 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which will give me 5 rows. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to append an empty list to my data row. So I've got an empty list, and then I need to create another empty list inside that. And then on that empty list, I'm going to then append some things. So I have line 15 is an inner loop. It's inside the outer for loop, and this is going to be for the columns or for the individual cells. So I'm going to do a for loop, and it's for y. Y is just a utility variable. In range, 0 to cols. So however many columns I had, cols is defined on line 8, and it tells me there's going to be 4 columns. And so now we actually have to put data in it. So I'm going to say data of x. Now this x is important. It corresponds to the x on line 11. So the outer loop utility variable x keeps my place. It's my placeholder of where I am in the rows. And I'm going to use that when I'm in the column to say data of whatever my row is, and I'm going to append, and I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to append string x comma y. So it's just giving me a coordinate system. So when I look here, it prints, that's my first row, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So it's the row that begins with 0. And then the next row begins with 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And it'll go on like that until I have 5 rows. So here are the challenges. Okay? We're going to pass in a 2-dimensional list. You should output the third element of the second row. So let's just run and do a check. Okay, so it failed. We knew it was going to fail because I didn't add any code. So basically what they've given us is they've given us a 2D list. And we're going to convert the command line arguments into a 2D list. So we have 2D list equals strings.argv of 1. And in this case, we're going to create for I in range 0 and the length of the 2D list that came in. We're going to say 2D list of I, and then we're going to split the information. So basically what they've said is we've got a series of strings. Those series of strings are actually comma-separated strings. So what it wants us to do is it wants us to print the third element of the second row. Well, we know we always go row-wise. So we're going to print list 2D. So the row is the second. So the first row has an index of 0, and the second row has an index of 1. And then the column is the third element. So the first element is going to have an index of 0. The second element is going to have an index of 1. and the third element is going to have an index of 2. So let's see if I got all that right. And I did. Okay, so now they're going to pass in a 2-dimensional list of numbers. We're going to add up all the numbers in each row and output that number. Okay, so we've got a 2-dimensional list. And so I'm going to need a helper variable because it says add up the numbers in each row and output that number, and then output a grand total. So I'm probably going to need, well, for right now, let's start with grand total. We're just going to set that at equal to 0. Since we have a 2-dimensional list, we know we're going to have 2 for loops. We're going to have an outer for loop and an inner for loop. So I'm going to start with the for loop for the outer. And I'm going to have my helper variable in the for loop be named outer. And I'm going to have that in numbers. Because numbers is my list right up here. So I have, actually I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say for row because I think that'll be clearer. In numbers. And then I now have to go to the column. So I'm going to say for column in row, and I want to have a row total and a grand total. So I'm going to say inside the first for loop, row total equals 0. And then inside the second for loop, I'm going to actually add up my columns. So row total is going to be row total plus column. Now, I wonder how many people think I'm going to have a problem here. So think, well, I'm doing the next. Okay? And then I'm going to say grand total equals row total. And at the very end of my script, I'm going to print grand total. Boy, I can't type right tonight. Anybody placing bets on whether I have an error? Well, I do. And it's our old type error before. Because remember what I said? I said that if it comes in and it's always going to be a string. If it comes into Python from the outside, unless you do something to it, it's going to be a string. So the actual values in my column are strings. So in my case, I need to turn them into integers. So let's run it again and see if I got it right. I did not. Okay. Your program failed for input. 1.1 minus 2 minus 1 minus 2. 1.1. It's 0. Okay. 0 minus 6, 3 minus 6. Oh, my bad. I did not read the directions correct. I needed to print row total as well. So now let's see if that works. I should have read that a little more carefully. Okay, so program output 6, 3, and 3. Row total equals 0. For column in row, row total equal row total plus int column. Then I'm going to print the row total, and then I'm going to say, oh, grand total equals grand total plus row total. Helps if I do things right. And now it works right. When I read the directions right and remember what I'm doing correctly, it works. So you see here that we have 2 for loops. We have an outer for loop and an inner for loop. The outer for loop deals with the rows. The inner for loop deals with the columns. I have 2 helper variables. I have grand total, which is defined outside the scope of all of the for loops because I'm going to need to use it at the end of the script outside the scope of the for loops. On line 13, I have defined another helper variable. that helper variable is now available to anything inside the first for loop. And that's great, because what I want to do is I want, every time I come back up to the top of the first for loop, I want to create a row total again, and I want to zero it out. And then I want to use that variable inside the second for loop to do my summation for the row totals. Okay, so I'm going to leave the rest of these challenges for now to you guys, and I'm going to go on to dictionaries because we've just got the dynamic creation. And I will put up some videos for these. So let's go to dictionaries. And this is probably going to run a little over tonight. Dictionaries are another way of handling data. They're a completely different way than what we've seen, because everything we have seen up till now has had an index. So you've had one, they always start at 0, and then you just use the index to get to an element on either a row or a column. Well, dictionaries are a little bit similar because they have rows. You can have dictionaries of dictionaries, and you can have lists of dictionaries. And so that's all similar, but what's very different about dictionaries is how you get to the data. So a dictionary is a data container, and it is key-based. It is not index-based. And what do I mean by key-based? Well, what I mean by key-based is that it's a key-value pair. So the key is a descriptor for the value. So in the example we see here, we have a variable called person, and that person is assigned a dictionary. How do I know it's a dictionary? I know it's a dictionary because I have an open curly brace and a closed curly brace. In Python, if you see an open curly brace, it always denotes the beginning of a dictionary. That open curly brace has to have somewhere a closed curly brace. They have to be a matching pair, just like the open and close of the square braces. They have to be a matching pair. So now I know that I have a dictionary on line 2. And inside a dictionary, there is always a key-value pair. The key usually is a string, and the value can be anything you want. The value could be a list. But for right now, the values are going to be strings and integers or booleans. So if I'm reading through line 2, what I see is I have a key called name, and I have a value of Lisa. So the name of this person is Lisa, and I have a key called age with a value of the integer 29. So age of 29. You'll see how this can make a little bit more sense than an index of 0 being 29. So if I run the code to the left, I'm just printing person. So person is the dictionary with age of 29 and name of Lisa. Okay, so how do they differ from a list? I just talked a little bit to it. A list is index-based, and a dictionary is value-based. Is key-value pair-based. And this becomes apparent when you're looking at a list and you're trying to make an association, because that's what the key-value pair is. The key-value pair is an association of two things. And Python will always keep those two things associated until you change it. So the association for person is that there's a name and that name is Lisa. And there's an age and that age is 29. Now I couldn't do that with a list. What I would have to do is have an element Lisa and then the number 29, and an element J and the number 25. And that's fine until it's 6 months later and you don't know why you put them that way in the list. And you don't know absolutely that Lisa is a name and 29 is the age. Maybe, 29 is, a length. Who knows? But when I'm looking at my dictionary, I always know that age is 29. And there's the association. The dictionaries are very handy because they allow you to associate things. And that's why you would use a dictionary. You use a dictionary because you want to make an association. And that association will have a key value pair. So how do I create a dictionary? Just like I created an empty list, I create a dictionary with the open and close curly braces. That's simple. And there won't be anything in them. You don't have to worry about that. So click on the Create tab to the left. Create an empty dictionary in the file on the left and assign it to the variable empty _ dict. Print the contents of the dictionary. So what is this? Create empty. So that's what I need to do. And I'm going to say, that's my variable name. And then I'm going to print that variable. Oops. And that was the code challenge. So I created an empty dictionary. So here, define a dictionary with pre-existing values. So that's what we did in the previous section. So now they want us to create a populated dictionary with first name Ringo, last name Star. So I'm going to do that here, and I'm going to say person is equal. So open and close curly braces, say it's going to be a dictionary, and I'm going to have first name is Ringo, and the next key value pair is going to be last name Star. Oops, 2 R's. So, and now I'm going to print out the contents of the dictionary. Nope, what did I do wrong? Check output. Last name Star, first name Ringo. Okay. So this is one of those times where don't drive yourself crazy. Okay. Codio reordered these things for me. I didn't reorder them. I put them in there exactly as they did. When I go through to check this, if this one is wrong and I come in and see that you've got the right code, you're going to get full credit for it. So this is one of those times, don't drive yourself crazy. And the reason that this is not coming up correct in Codio is because there's no guarantee to the order with which things are output. And in this case, their order output is just different. So don't drive yourself crazy over that one. Okay, access data from a dictionary. How do I get to the data in a dictionary? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Just like when we were doing a list, and in that list we had, we used the index to access the list. What we're doing here is we're going to use the key of the key value pair. So if I run the code to the left, I'm going to print person. Well, what happens if I print person, if I just want the name of the person? So if I print person of name, what will I get? I didn't get the right thing as I expected because I didn't put that out. But I got the name of the person, and in this case, I got Lisa. Okay? So here for the challenge, I misread that. Print the age of Lisa. So in this case, I'm going to print age, and I'm going to check it, and I'm going to get rid of that because that's making it wrong, and I passed. How do you add something to a dictionary? Well, there are a couple of different ways. I already have a person. First name Ringo, last name Star. Now, what if I wanted to add, in this case, instrument drums to it? So, all I have to do is add the entries, is just say person of, now I'm just going to add instrument, is going to equal drums. Sorry about that. Okay? Oh, it's the string. And I'm also going to say person of born is 1940. Okay? And so to print the first name. So, okay. All right. So we're going to say print person of name was born in person of born. So let's see what happens when I check it. Okay, so something failed, and why did it fail? Let's see what I did wrong. It's saying error, name, first name is not defined. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, my bad. These are strings, and I was using it like a variable. So, absolutely right, it should have been wrong. Okay. Can't convert int object into str implicitly. That's a very true statement too. Okay. What did it tell us now? Syntax error, unexpected EOF. Did I get something wrong again? I did. My apologies for doing this tonight, people. I forgot the closing parenthesis, and now it's fine. So, update entries in a dictionary. Just like when you updated a list, you can update entries in a dictionary by using the key and just setting it equal to. In this case, we added new elements by just adding a key, putting a key, and then a value. Well, in this case, if I want to change the value, I can simply do that by changing a value in an existing dictionary. So it says, create a dictionary with a grocery list. Assign the dictionary to the variable grocery list. Print out the contents of the grocery list. Well, this doesn't really give us everything we need. So let's tell us it just said it failed. Okay. So I'm going to say grocery list. And let's just say I'm going to put in milk. So what is it asking me to do here? It's saying, print out the contents of the grocery list one item at a time in order name, cost, and quantity. Okay. So I'm going to have the name, cost, and the quantity. So my name is going to be milk, and my cost is going to be $2.99, and my quantity is going to be 1. So now it says print out the contents of the grocery list one item at a time in order name, cost, and quantity. So we're going to say print grocery list of name, print grocery list of cost, print grocery list of quantity. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. So, here we have the grocery list of quantity. So that's what it tells us it wants us to print out. And it said milk $2.99 milk $2.99 So apparently it wanted milk $2.99 and it wanted quantity of 2. So that'll get us to the first half that's right. And the second part that's right is going to be milk $2.99 So they want us to change the quantity sorry about that, to 3. Okay, and so now we're going to print out all of the elements from the grocery list again. And it passed. So that's how you update entries in a dictionary. Now, how did you delete an element from the dictionary? Well, you do that using the del keyword. So you can delete an entry in a dictionary by simply using the del keyword. You can also clear all of the elements in the dictionary from using the clear function on the dictionary. So unlike del, which deletes the element in the dictionary, so it would be del space variable name and then the key value, clear removes everything from the dictionary but leaves it empty. So you can also, what did it do here that the Codio is wrong? Name person is not defined. Oh, because we already deleted it. L person. Okay, so that's what happened because we tried to print person after we, nope, that's not what should have happened. I don't know why Codio is wrong right now. Yeah, I'm not sure why Codio is wrong on this one or what it's looking for. I'll have to check that out. Okay, so lists of dictionaries. Lists of dictionaries becomes important because you're going to have to do that in your next project. And a list of dictionary is just that. You have a list, and the elements in that list are a dictionary. So you can go through it row-wise like you would a list, and then you can access the elements inside each row like you would a dictionary. So here when we run the code to the left, we print persons, and when we want to access that information, we say person of one, so it would be the second element, and then the key of the value we want to print out. Okay? You can also do a dictionary of dictionaries. A dictionary of dictionaries is a little different because, excuse me, I have to take a drink of water. Because you have a key, and the key is just a string, and then you have a value, and the value is a dictionary. Excuse me, I want to cough. So that is, a dictionary of dictionaries. So if you're going to spend time looking at these, what you want to do is you want to spend time looking at the list of dictionaries, because you're going to need that when we go through the project. I know this was a lot of information tonight, so please feel free to email me if you have any questions, and I will try and get some new videos up to help out with the challenges. Does anybody have any questions before I go?
Not right now. Thanks for going through that.
Okay, I know there was a lot. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. So, everybody have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Stop screen sharing and stop recording.
All right. Bye.